I'm Nathan Ponchard, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the 2021 MG ZS EV. This is Australia's most affordable electric vehicle. It's only $43,990 drive away, which makes it $8,000 cheaper than a Hyundai Ioniq EV, $10,000 cheaper than a Nissan Leaf, and $20,000 cheaper than a Hyundai Kona EV. So is it real value at 44 grand drive away, or is that a false economy? We're about to find out. Now, intriguingly, the ZS EV is still based on the ZS and not the facelifted ZST that launched around the same time at the end of 2020. So we've got the previous look of the car, which actually launched in China in 2018. In terms of what is sitting very low in the ZS's engine bay is a liquid-cooled lithium-ion 44.5 kilowatt-hour electric motor that is built in a factory owned by MG, also in China. And that gives this car a range of 263 kilometers according to the WLTP cycle, which is actually pretty competitive. It's not as good as the Hyundai Ioniq, which is 331, and it's not as good as the Kona, which is into the 400s, I think 449 for now, will be 484 when the facelifted model comes later in 2021. So you are getting less range for less price, but that doesn't make the ZS EV a lesser car. Now, you can tell this is the EV because it is metallic clipper blue. This pale blue color, which I don't particularly like, but you might, is unique to this car. Although there are some styling inspirations in this vehicle that you can see from other cars. Namely, this diamond spotted grille here, which is all plastic, that looks very much A-Class inspired. And here behind the huge MG octagon, we've got the charging ports, which is actually a really clever idea, I reckon, because it doesn't matter what side of the car the charger is located, the charging ports are central. You don't have to flip it around like you would a petrol car. MG says that the LED lights that run around these circular headlights are London Eye LED ones, which is a nice link to its very distant English heritage. The other way you can tell that it's a ZS EV is that it has its own 17-inch alloys with these kind of little markings on it here that are meant to look vaguely electrical, and that does make it look a little bit different. This is also an Essence, which is a one spec only car for Australia, so it is loaded, including this huge Stargazer sunroof that we'll see when we get in the car. It's also fitted with Michelin Primacy 3 tyres, 215/50/17s, which are not a performance tyre, but they're also not a Chinese tyre, which is a good thing. Walking around the back, you'll note that we have rear privacy glass and fairly close tint on the front windows, but weirdly, the front windscreen doesn't have the same level of tint, and as we'll discover in the car, that's a bit of an issue in summer. We also have keyless entry, roof rails here that match these little inserts in the side skirts here, and coming around the back, you'll notice we have this cute little MG pilot badge here, which is all about the active safety in the car. That means that it has AEB, forward collision warning, lane departure warning, blind spot detection, rear cross traffic alert, traffic jam assist. It has a lot of stuff all as standard in this car, which again is pretty comprehensive for an MG and pretty comprehensive for 44 grand drive away. Much like the front with the charging port, the MG octagon in the back opens the boot here. We don't have a spare wheel, we only have tyre inflation kit under the floor, but that means 359 litres, which is actually pretty competitive, and will link to one of the main USPs about this car, and that is for a small SUV, the ZS EV has a truckload of space. On the sides here we have these little netted areas to put quite a lot of stuff actually. They're quite deep. Usually they're really shallow and they're not in this car. We have one boot light, can't really see anywhere to hang anything. The floor does lift up and has two levels. This level is the lowest level. You can put it on one that much higher, so it sort of slightly segues into the back seat fold, but the rear seat doesn't fold flat. It just sort of flops onto itself. Anyway, let's get in the car. Inside the ZS EV, even though it doesn't have the updated interior of the ZST, I think it's still pretty persuasive. The way that these doors close is with a really solid thunk. We have this nice squidgy material on the top of the dash here that looks like it almost has real stitching. We do have inadequate window tint that I mentioned before for the Australian market, so when it's really strong in sun, you do get a lot coming through the windscreen, which leads me to the steering wheel, which, even though it looks like it has nice perforated leather and stitching, is actually synthetic leather and gets really hot in sun, and as do the seats, which again are nicely stitched and have French double stitching according to MG, but they get really hot in sun. In terms of the multimedia of the car, we only have an 8-inch screen here, not the 10-inch screen of the ZST, but it's all reasonably effective. The USB ports are down in a little tray underneath the center console here, which are reasonably easy to reach from the driver's side, not from the passenger. They get a little 12-volt outlet down here, so you can plug your phone in and leave it hidden away down there so no one can see it, so it can't get hot, and run the Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, although this does also have sat-nav embedded in the car. Among the changes specific to the ZS EV is that it has a charge dial here instead of a tachometer, which will swing all the way around to boost when you flatten it, and it does have power, this car. It also has this little rotary dial here, which can often be clumsy in some cars. It is not a favourite of mine, but it works pretty well in the ZS EV, which is a surprise. It also has 3 little toggle switches here, which are nicely metallicized. The left one is mode, which goes between eco, normal and sport. I actually think that you could drive the ZS EV in sport much of the time because it gives the steering a nice bit of weight and it doesn't make the throttle too sensitive. Eco less so, normal fine. The interesting one for Formula One fans is KERS in the middle, which is all about the regen braking. There's moderate and heavy is number 2 and number 3, and light is number 1. I have been driving it around in number 3, and I actually think that it works really well. You don't need to brake very often, and when it comes to the brakes, for an EV, the brakes in this car are really normal. Like, you don't notice that you're in an electric vehicle, and I think that comes down to the essence of what the ZS EV is about, is that this is normalizing electric vehicle motoring. What else we have here is a steering wheel that is nice to hold but doesn't have reach adjustment, only tilt. These switches here, which are really easy to use, are so clearly inspired by a W204 Mercedes-Benz C-Classes, as are the outer vents here from an Audi A3, and these door locking switches from Audi as well, although I can think of worse brands to probably copy than those ones. But it all works reasonably well, you know. You've got 4 auto down windows, but only the driver gets auto up. You've got this enormous sunroof with an electric screen that comes across, although it is slightly see-through, and again in hot weather it does really pound into the interior. Thankfully, what looks like climate control but is actually just push button aircon, although you do have to twist the dials for the thing to come up in the center console here like that, is really effective, so that does mitigate that heat aspect of it. You have fairly rudimentary seat adjustment. The driver has a 6-way electric, but when you lift the front of it as if you're going to tilt underneath your thigh, it lifts the back of the seat only and not the front. The passenger has nothing, just manual fore and aft and backrest, but weirdly the seats are actually quite comfortable. Even the passenger is quite comfortable. It doesn't matter that there's not that much adjustment. I find it quite pleasant. In here we've got 2 cup holders. Again, we've got the coconut water holder in the door here, which is quite big. It could take a 1.5 litre bottle if you squeezed it in, as could that one. And the general fit and finish of this interior is really nice, really good. Let's see if the back is up to the same standard. In the back of the ZS EV, 2 things immediately stand out. One is how much leg room there is. Look at how much room I've got in front of my knees. I've got all of this foot space, even though that seat is as low as it will go. This is almost medium SUV levels of leg room, although the seat is quite low down. You don't sit anywhere near as high as you would in many other medium SUVs. And there's also this panoramic stargazer roof, which MG claims is one of the biggest. It's certainly the biggest in the small SUV class. It goes right to the point behind my head, and makes the vision in the back of it seem much better than it probably is. You can definitely tell that the driver has seat adjustment and not the passenger, because the left seat here is significantly higher than the one in front. So if any of your children have OCD, that's going to drive them nuts. At least there's 2 map pockets in the back here, both of which feel nicely made. You only get 1 USB port though, so that could cause a few fights. There's a little bit of a tray here in front. 0 lump in the floor, completely flat rear floor. I've sat in the middle seat here and it's actually quite comfortable too. It's not a prison sentence sitting there, and you can still fit at least a 1 litre or 1.25 litre bottle in the door, if maybe not a 1.5. I think long distance comfort would be okay, even though the seat isn't great and you are reclined quite a way back. It's still reasonably comfortable. It might make your bum numb after a while. I can feel that sort of potentially going to happen. You don't get a center armrest and you don't get any cup holders. You only get the things in the doors. But I suppose if room is everything, then the ZS EV definitely has something going for it. The first thing that immediately comes to mind when you drive the ZS EV is just how smooth it is. The drivetrain in this car is absolutely terrific. It completely transcends the money that MG's asking for it because it feels just as good as any premium European. It's slick, it's punchy. MG says it'll do 0 to 60 in 3.1 seconds, which is really quick. 0 to 100 in 8.2, which is again quick, massively quicker than the 4-speed auto petrol ZS, which is a massive slug, and faster than the ZST with the new 1.3 turbo. So it's surprisingly a performance car. Where that tends to fall down though is the suspension tune of the car. MG Motor Australia says that it has had some testing done in Australia and New Zealand, but it doesn't feel like it. The steering's good, especially in sport mode. It has nice weighting, it's nicely responsive, and the general maneuverability around town is there. It just has terrible suspension dampers. They mean that the back end of the car in particular constantly bobs around. If there's someone in the car who is the canary in the mine for car sickness, this is the car that's going to make them have it happen. Even I felt a bit queasy driving it sometimes, and Sydney's roads are bad. So there is that. But you know, this is meant to be an urban car and these are on urban roads. It's an easy fixed solution, changing it to aftermarket dampers, which would be the solution. But I feel like we're still one step away from this car actually being what it deserves to be. Once it's had the ZST changes and once it has the new dashboard and hopefully a suspension tune commensurate with the way this car drives, then it really will achieve what it can do. Otherwise, it's a case of hit and miss. I think there's no engine noise, but there is quite a bit of tyre rumble on core surfaces. The interior is mostly strong and nicely built, and the driving position is surprisingly good given that there's hardly any adjustment. But when you start to pick through things in the car, like the stereo, for example, it's, you know, has all the stuff in it, but the 3D surround sound in it sounds very synthetic. Again, that windscreen, it's a sunny day here, you can see it's a lot of glare coming into the car. The regenerative braking though is terrific. And I love this little KERS thing, the way you can adjust it, the way it holds your adjustment regardless of what setting you're in. You don't have to keep tweaking a steering wheel paddle or things like you do in an Audi e-tron. Just being able to quickly flick the battery and seeing you've got 119 to empty in our case. The controls are really easy to use. The car is a generally inoffensive and reasonably pleasant car to drive. It's just that ride quality. It's constantly irritating. And I don't think that the ZS EV is ever going to really be what it can be without it being fixed. In terms of charging, the ZS EV gives you 2 options, or actually 3 really. You can plug it into a normal wall plug and it takes like 33 hours or something, but if you plug it into the 7 kilowatt wall charger that you can have in the garage on a 240 volt thing, it takes 7 hours to charge. And if you use the CCS plug-in and go to a fast charger, it can go to any of the superchargers, but it'll take around 45 minutes to do 80% charge, which gives it 80% of 263 kilometers distance. So while when you live in an old terrace area like I do, where charging is difficult, you need to find a charging station to do that, or hope that your workplace, if you still have one, has something like that. But if you have the thing at home, you just plug it in maybe one night a week and you have perfect, quiet, effortless electric motoring. And that's what's going to put, hopefully, according to MG, up to 3,000 people a year in this car in Australia. At the end of the day, if normalising electric vehicle motoring is what the ZS EV is all about, then I think it does an amazingly good job. It looks inoffensively handsome, it has plenty of equipment, it has a very affordable price, and it still comes with an 8-year, 160,000 kilometre warranty for the electric motor and battery, and a 5-year warranty for the car, even though a normal MG gets 7 years. So that's all still pretty generous. I think the one area though that it is a false economy is that suspension tune. If you can factor in 4 new shock absorbers for your car and still what's that, $1,000, then this car is still a bargain. If you live with what it's got, then I'm not entirely sure that you're going to be aware of its charms, because you're going to be constantly irritated by the one major flaw the car has. And that's a shame, because it deserves to drive better than the way it does. If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video, hit the notification bell and leave a comment on the MG ZS EV or on chasing cars. Thanks for watching.